Ready to dive into a topic that's both fascinating and kind of mind-bending.
I know, right? Always up for a good thought experiment.
We're talking virtual persons. And no, this isn't some sci-fi movie plot, though it could feel like it. Our source material is Dr. Siamak Goudarzi's book, The Emergence of Virtual Persons.
He dives deep into the legal and ethical stuff around AI and robot rights, which, let's be honest, is becoming less theoretical by the day.
Exactly. So, for anyone listening who hasn't quite wrapped their head around this, when we say virtual persons, what are we even talking about? Like robots running for office?
Aha, not quite there yet.
Yeah,
But think about it. We have natural persons, that's us, right?
makes sense.
And then there's legal persons, which are more like corporations, those kinds of entities.
Okay, I'm following.
Dr. Goudarzi saying as AI gets crazy advanced, maybe we need a third category virtual persons. These would be AI, robots, super sophisticated digital avatars that operate with so much autonomy, it challenges how we define personhood.
Okay, I see where this is going. But why is this coming up now? What's changed?
AI's evolved big time. Not long ago, it was all about rules, computers following instructions.
Right, basic programming.
Machine learning, deep learning. AI is learning from data, making decisions on a level that's, well, kind of freaky.
So it's not just getting smarter, it's almost becoming an entity, not just a tool.
Exactly. So then all these questions pop up. If an AI creates art, makes an invention, even gives a medical diagnosis, who owns that? Who's responsible if it screws up? That's what Dr. Goudarzi wants us to figure out.
I can already see the legal battles. But before we go there, I'm curious, what do people even think about this? Are we ready for robot rights protests?
It's interesting, Dr. Goudarzi talks about global surveys. Turns out most people aren't fully on board with full-on legal rights for robots, yet at least.
Yet, so there's wiggle room.
Here's the kicker. When you describe AI as sentient, feeling, experiencing things, people get more on board. Like, morally, it feels different, even if the law hasn't caught up.
So it comes down to how we define sentience. And when does that change how we treat something, legal and ethically, which is huge.
And that's where history comes in. Dr. Goudarzi takes us way back, talking about how the very idea of legal personhood has evolved over centuries.
Never thought of it that way, honestly.
We kind of take it for granted, right? But it wasn't always a thing. Dr. Goudarzi goes back to Roman law, persona ficta, they called it.
Sounds fancy.
Basically, it allowed groups, not just individuals, to have legal standing, like the Roman state itself or even corporations.
So recognizing an entity needs a legal identity to function in society, even if it's not one human.
Exactly. This idea grew throughout history. The church became a legal person in the Middle Ages. Later, joint stock companies. Legal personhood was key for them to exist and be held accountable. Dr. Goudarzi uses these examples to show how we might think about virtual persons.
Okay, so historical precedent exists. But to be clear, what makes a virtual person a virtual person?
Good question, and Dr. Goudarzi's got a framework. 4 things. Autonomy, interactivity, embodiment, and personality. So a virtual person needs to act independently, engage with us and other systems, have some kind of embodiment, physical or digital, and even simulate emotions and stuff.
So more than just using AI as a tool, it's about AI becoming almost relatable.
Precisely. He even breaks it down further. Embodied virtual persons are physical robots, and digital ones are more like avatars, chatbots, that kind of thing. Each type brings its own challenges, legally speaking.
This is a lot to unpack, but here's the big question that probably everyone's thinking, do we really need to be talking about rights for AI? Isn't that a bit?
Now we're getting to the heart of it. And Dr. Goudarzi tackles this head on. He brings up sentience, that ability to feel, experience things, have good or bad emotions. His argument is, if AI gets to a level of sentience like humans or even some animals, can we ethically deny them rights?
Like our understanding of animal sentience has changed how we treat them legally, right? Could the same thing happen with AI?
Exactly what he's exploring. He lays out arguments for and against AI rights, because it's definitely not a simple answer.
So who gets to decide? Is this for legal experts, or does the public have a say?
Dr. Goudarzi's point is, this isn't just some theoretical debate, it affects all of us, so everyone needs to be part of the conversation. Policymakers, tech people, ethicists, the public, everyone.
That's a lot of voices. But I guess that's the point, right? This isn't just about robots. It's about how we want our future to look.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so less philosophy for a sec. What are the actual arguments people are making right now for or against AI rights?
All right, let's dive in. On one side, you've got the folks saying sentience equals rights, period. Doesn't matter if you're made of flesh or silicon, if you can feel, you deserve protection.
Makes sense on the surface. But what's the counter-argument?
The other side says, hang on, AI right now isn't conscious, doesn't have morals like we do.
Good point. It's making decisions, but is it choosing ethically?
That's the debate. They also worry about the practical stuff. How do you fit AI into our laws? And then there's the scary stuff like job losses, inequality getting worse.
Wow, okay, so we've got one side focused on AI potentially feeling deserving protection, and the other highlighting all the ways it's not human and the problems that could come from giving it legal status. Big crossroads.
You got it. And to figure this out, we got to get real about what AI can do right now. How close are we to truly sentient machines? What are the limits we need to understand before we start handing out rights?
Which brings us perfectly to the next part of our deep dive, the tech itself. What's actually going on under the hood of AI?
So let's get into the nitty-gritty of the tech itself. AI's come a long way, no doubt, but when we talk about true sentience, consciousness.
Like the robots taking over the world level of AI?
Haha. Not quite. But it's easy to get carried away with that stuff, especially with all the movies and books out there. But the reality is, AI today, it has some pretty big limitations. And Dr. Goudarzi does a good job of laying those out because it's important to understand those before we even start talking about virtual persons.
Okay, so what are we talking about? What can't AI do yet?
One of the biggest things is context. Common sense, you know? Humans, we can navigate all sorts of crazy social situations, pick up on little cues.
Read between the lines, basically.
Exactly. AI still struggles with that. It can process tons of data, but it might miss the stuff that, to us, is obvious.
So even if it's super fast, super smart in some ways, it's not thinking like we do.
Nope. And then there's the data itself. AI learns from data, right? But that data can have bias baked in, inaccuracies.
Which means the AI could end up making biased decisions, even if that's not what the programmer intended.
Bingo. And that's why Dr. Goudarzi talks so much about data quality and ethics in AI development. It's not enough to make AI powerful, it has to be responsible too.
Makes sense. So common sense bias. What else is holding AI back right now?
True learning. AI today, it's amazing at specific tasks, but it can't really learn on its own, adapt like humans do.
So no robots composing symphonies anytime soon, huh?
Not likely. And don't forget the practical stuff. AI needs a ton of computing power, energy. It's not exactly sustainable the way it is now.
Okay, fair enough. But let's say, for argument's sake, that we do overcome these limits. What if AI becomes truly sentient, conscious, maybe even surpasses us in some ways?
That's the big question, isn't it? And that's why Dr. Goudarzi's book is so timely. He's saying we got to think about these possibilities now, not when it's too late.
So it's not just a debate about AI rights today. It's about preparing for a future where this stuff might actually happen.
Exactly. Proactive, not reactive. And part of that is realizing it's not just about the tech itself. Culture, how people view AI, that plays a huge role.
Yeah, good point. Not everyone sees robots the same way.
Right. Dr. Goudarzi talks about how, in some cultures, Japan, for example, robots are seen as helpers, almost like companions.
It's like their whole culture embraces technology in a different way.
Totally. Whereas Western cultures, we've got all those dystopian stories, robots taking over.
So robot rights might be a harder sell in some places than others.
For sure. So it's not just about laws. It's about understanding these different perspectives, respecting that not everyone's going to be on the same page.
Which is going to be tough, but important.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole psychology of how we relate to AI, especially as it gets more human-like.
Right. Dr. Goudarzi talks about how people form these parasocial relationships with AI, like they treat it as a friend, even though it's not.
That reminds me of that movie Her, where the guy falls in love with his AI assistant. Back then it seemed crazy. Now it's like, maybe not so much.
It's like science fiction becoming reality, right? And it brings up this question of trust, how much we should rely on AI, especially for things like healthcare, legal advice, even companionship, like you said.
Which brings us to a whole other area, AI companions. This is where things get really wild.
AICs, Dr. Goudarzi calls them. It sounds futuristic, but honestly, they're already being developed. AI specifically designed for companionship, support, interaction.
Okay, this is where I start to get a little freaked out. What are the ethics of having AI friends or even partners?
Yeah, Dr. Goudarzi gets into all that. He talks about the potential for AI to reinforce stereotypes, the whole issue of consent in AI relationships. It gets complicated fast.
Let's unpack that a bit. What kinds of AI companions are we talking about?
He breaks it down into categories. Professional AICs, like for legal stuff or medical help.
Yeah,
Emotional and personal companions, basically for people who are lonely. Then there's health and well-being AICs to keep track of your health, remind you about meds, that kind of thing.
I can see those being helpful, especially for people who need extra care.
Definitely. But then you've got AICs designed for, well, intimate relationships, and that's where things get really epically tricky.
AI and romantic partners. Now we're in uncharted territory. What does consent even mean in that context? And what does that do to our understanding of real relationships?
Exactly the questions Dr. Goudarzi raises. He talks about how simulated consent could mess with our ideas of boundaries, healthy relationships. It's a slippery slope.
So AI, boyfriends, girlfriends, that's a whole other can of worms we need to think about before it becomes the norm.
Right. And even with the less intense types of AICs, there's still the issue of bias. If the AI is trained on biased data, it could end up reinforcing those biases, which would be bad news.
Like imagine an AI companion that's subtly racist or sexist
Ew.
because of the data it learned from. Not good.
Not good at all. That's why Dr. Goudarzi stresses transparency and accountability. We need to know how these AIs are making decisions, what data they're using, and how to prevent them from causing harm.
So as cool as AI companions could be, we need to be super careful, make sure they're developed ethically.
Absolutely. And it's not just a national thing. AI crosses borders, right? So now you've got different legal systems, cultural norms, ethical frameworks. How do we deal with that?
Okay, now we're talking global level complexity. This is getting intense.
It is, and Dr. Goudarzi dives deep into these global challenges, even offers some potential solutions, but it's definitely not a simple fix.
Wow, my head's spinning a bit. We've gone from what makes a person to AI rights to robots taking our jobs to AI companions.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It is a lot, but all these things, they're connected. And to understand virtual persons, we got to look at it from all angles.
And I have a feeling Dr. Goudarzi has even more to say about where this is all going. What kind of future trends does he see on the horizon?
Oh yeah, he definitely doesn't stop there. He goes into some pretty mind-blowing predictions about where this whole virtual person thing could be headed.
Okay, hit me with it. What's in store for humanity? Robot overlords.
Let's hope not. But seriously, Dr. Goudarzi talks about AI becoming even more autonomous, more complex. Like, imagine AI making decisions that right now only humans can handle.
So not just playing chess, but like negotiating treaties, running companies,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Exactly. And he talks about AI becoming more emotionally and cognitively sophisticated too, which raises a whole bunch of questions about our relationships with AI.
Right, like if an AI can understand and respond to your emotions, is it still just a machine? That line starts to blur.
And legally, things get really interesting. Dr. Goudarzi thinks we might see whole new legal categories emerge, like electronic personhood, which obviously brings up a ton of issues around liability, accountability.
So like if your self-driving car gets an accident, who's at fault? The car, the owner, the company that made the AI.
Yeah.
My head hurts just thinking about
Do you
it.
know, right? It's a legal minefield, but it's stuff we got to figure out because this tech is only going to get more advanced. Dr. Darzy's not saying it's all doom and gloom, though. He also sees a lot of potential for good if we do this right.
Okay, so less robot apocalypse, more. Figuring out how to live and work alongside these virtual beings. But how do we make sure that happens? How do we steer this in the right direction?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Dr. Goudarzi talks a lot about responsible development, ethical guidelines, and this isn't just on the shoulders of scientists and programmers.
Right. This is a societal thing. We all have a role to play.
Exactly. He talks about the need for public dialogue, for people to get informed and involved in shaping these policies, because ultimately it's going to affect all of us.
It's almost like we're at this fork in the road. And the choices we make now about how we develop AI, how we integrate it into society, those choices are going to determine what our future looks like.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. This isn't just about robots. It's about what kind of world we want to create. And it's up to all of us to decide.
Well, there you have it, folks. We've gone from what makes a person to robots demanding rights to AI companions blurring the lines of relationships. It's been a wild ride.
It really has. And this is just the beginning. The world of virtual persons is only going to get more complex, more fascinating, and more important for all of us to understand.
Absolutely. So keep those brains buzzing, keep asking questions, and join us next time as we delve into another mind-blowing topic that's shaping our future. Until then, stay curious.